Hey y'all, I hope you're all doing well. Today's a pretty good day, and today I have something a little bit different for all of you. I know you've been watching some of my psychological analysis of mangas like Berserk and Goodnight Punpun, so I figured I'd do another analysis on Goodnight Punpun. I just want to take a moment before I start to say thank you to the viewer who recommended this. It has been a really, really interesting manga so far. I've only read up to chapter 20 because I'm trying to do a video every 10 chapters or so. So I did one. My first video was from chapter 1 to 10. I know I didn't cover all of it because it's actually very, very complex. So I covered some of the most important parts within that chapters in relation to psychological development and how that's showcased in that manga. And I've made a script and a video for the next few chapters, so from chapter 10 to 20. But I wanted to do this specific video on what is it? Chapter 16 specifically, because I think it has a immense amount of psychological significance, especially in relation to Punpun, as well as how we can relate this back to all of us as individuals. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so in this chapter, I mean, it starts out really funny because I like the comedic effect. Pun Pun really needs to take a piss. So that's pretty much the beginning of the chapter. He's taking a piss. He's really needs to take a piss, and he's kind of pretty much releasing his piss at the moment. And I think he's getting some sort of pleasure off this, which is kind of common when people pee and they feel a sense of pleasure. I think there's actually like a word for it, but I don't know what it's called at the moment. But yeah, so he's pissing, and I think he's also unconscious because he's on the top of the miso factory with his friend, and the explosion went off because of the cigarette and the fire explosion, and he's trying to save Aiko right now, but at the same time he really needs to take a piss. So he's pissing and trying to save Aiko, and I think he's unconscious at the moment, right? So and then the really cool thing is he starts to have a flashback. So let's try to analyze what the flashback is. First thing that comes up to his mind is immediately there is no God. His uncle screaming, "There's no God." So why is that such a significant thing? First, okay, let's see. First thing is God is a really, really interesting concept throughout Goodnight Punpun. And the author is actually really cool in a sense. He represents God in a physical form with, I think he's shown right here somewhere. Give me a sec. This dude right here. So this dude right here, uh, this guy right here is God. And God, you can take it in two different ways. So God, you can take it in a sense of like the actual aspect of God, so something that's divine, or in a religious sense. But you can also take it in the form of let me write this down, form of the unconscious. Okay, so I think I'm pretty sure the author is very versed in Jungian concepts, and I think he refers to God in a psychological sense. So God within the psyche. So he represents God as unconscious, as Punpun's unconscious specifically, right? So the panel starts off with "there is no God," referring to various different things. So one, generally there's no God, or like a nihilistic belief, or the second, the lack of understanding of Punpun and his unconscious. So no, as in negating no God, and no understanding of the unconscious. Okay, so his unconscious aspects, unconscious desires, and so forth. Now from there, it goes immediately to a flashback of Aiko when he first met Aiko, and her saying, "I really will kill you if he doesn't hold up his promise," and so forth, and saying, "I love you too," and generally just a first interaction with kind of love and partner and the opposite sex. So this is very interesting because it shows various different things from a Jungian perspective. One thing is it shows the beginning of the interpretation or integration of what Jung called the anima or animus, right? It represents the anima and animus, okay? So the anima is the feminine aspect within a male, and the animus is the masculine aspect within the female, okay? So this panel represents Punpun's recognition of both the masculine and feminine aspects of himself because he's introduced to the opposite gender, right? So as soon as he gets introduced to Aiko, he intrinsically has a sense of what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be female? What does it mean to be in relationship with the opposite gender? And all of these things are going on in his head. So I think these like various different panels right here, exemplify all of these things, right? And he goes into a kind of like state. The drawing is really nice right here. He goes into a state of like, it's almost like taking a psychedelic. He's very euphoric and kind of out of the world and unnatural and so forth. So I like that drawing because it represents the feelings that a male gets when he interacts with a female. And especially love at a young age could be misconstrued or considered as really, really pure in a sense of you're only feeling the purest forms of feelings, right? You are attracted to the person and you see them not as a physical object, but rather as a sense of comfort. And you don't particularly understand the idiosyncrasies of why you're attracted to that person, but you still are. So it's a memorable event for Punpun. So that is what this panel is kind of introducing. And as we go, the second panel is a flashback into a very traumatic event in Punpun's life, which is, let me bring this over here. Give me a sec. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, let me bring this over here. Okay, so the second panel is a very traumatic event in Punpun's life, which is he walks outside and he sees his dad knock the shit out of his mom, which is crazy. So the first time I read it, I'm like, holy snap, there's domestic abuse. There we go, right? And it was crazy. And this lays the foundation because overall the aspect is he's almost about to die. That's kind of like the representation. And he's taking a piss at the same time. But let's ignore the part of him taking a piss and focus on him about to die, right? And he's having this flashback, and we need to understand why exactly these are the events that comes into his psyche, right? So this event is extremely traumatic, and it happens in his childhood. And why the reason why it's traumatic is his conceptualization of his father kind of deteriorates from that, right? Before this, he had a sense of like not being able to understand his father, but at the same time he looked up to his father in almost like a heroic type of manner, right? But after this, he sees his father in a different light of abuse, as well as trauma, as well as not being able to understand, why do I still like my father even though he does this? Why do I still like my father even though he's abusive to my mother, right? And it's a traumatic event. Okay, so let me erase this and let's keep moving. Okay. Next aspect we will go through is, again, an interaction with his parents. So they're having an argument about, let's bring this over here. Okay, yeah. So they're having an argument about his father just leaving his job randomly. So there's aspects of irresponsibility, hearing parents' struggles, and then he hears his mom say, I wish I never had a kid. You're a useless person, and so forth, right? This marriage was a failure. I shouldn't have had a baby. I should have enjoyed my life and freedom. So there's aspect of letting himself and who he is as a person, knowing that he has no type of love towards his from his parents, as well as there's aspect of recognizing the unconscious aspect of his psyche, which is his parents not loving him, so no love. And the second thing is forcing him to reinterpret his relationship with his parents, as well as see his parents in a different light, okay? So in a very negative light. Another traumatic event which comes across his psyche. Time goes by. This is also another traumatic event where his mom takes him and is about to leave the house because they got into a fight with his father. And then afterward, another event he remembers is creating kind of a first interaction with two individuals who may be potential friends. Then from there, this is a really interesting panel because you see here, right there, that Punpun is drawing a baseball player. And if you note that, I noted that at the beginning of chapter 1 or 2 of the manga, he has a conversation about his father and how much he likes baseball. And that in itself implants within his psyche, which says that my father likes this and this. I need to make him proud, and therefore I can aspire to be a baseball player. And this kind of leads him on to imagine himself being a baseball player. And this right here shows two things. One is maybe he's very interested in drawing and art, and I suspect that's going to be like a popular thing in the future because he's specifically just drawing something. And also this idea of a baseball. If he is interested in art, then we ask the question, why is he drawing a baseball player, right? And again, it goes back to this idea of childhood interactions with your parents being extremely important, and the conversations that you have with your parents shaping the way you think and almost the way you see reality, your goals, and your aspirations as well, okay? So again, the author is trying to kind of tell you that childhood experiences are one of the most important things in psychological development. Same thing over here where you see almost like his first positive interactions with his friends and so forth, right? So that's an important aspect in his life, which is his friends, right? Okay, let's move on. Now, the next part is his interaction with his uncle, which leads him to this idea of God, right? So his uncle introduces him to this idea of a God, saying, if you ever feel kind of lonely or need answers and so forth, you chant this tinkle tinkle holy, what is it? Dear God, dear God, dear God, dear God, tinkle tinkle holy, and God will appear to give you advice, right? And God, again, like I mentioned, is a metaphor and a symbolic way of showing Punpun's unconscious. God, in a sense, throughout the first 20 chapters I've read, he's not only good and gives him like advice, but he also is kind of, you can misunderstand him as being cruel in some sense because he gives advice and then taunts Punpun and then just leaves. So that begs the question to the reader, why is God represented as not good, not bad, but kind of indecisive. Like you don't really know if he's good or bad. He says some good things and he might say something that sounds a little bit shady, right? Or condescending or judgmental, right? And judgmental is a good word, right? So why is God, let's see, God as judgmental, okay? Mind my extremely horrible writing, but it is what it is. I'm a doctor, guys. I'm actually not, but okay. You know what it is. Every single doctor you go to, they just have like the worst writing on planet Earth. Go to get medications. Like, what is this? How do the pharmacists even understand the medication it makes? Anyways, okay. So let's go to, yeah, so God as judgmental, right? You can take it as judgmental. And this is trying to show in a metaphorical sense that your unconscious is always judgmental, right? Your unconscious is always the opposite of what you desire, right? So in relation to Punpun, some of his unconscious aspects are assertiveness or being able to say no or being able to think in an assertive manner, right? So this goes back to his interactions with Aiko, where Aiko seems to be the masculine aspects within their relationship, while Punpun he almost takes a subordinate and feminine aspect within their relationship. And this comes from his relationship and his interactions between his parents, right? So as he sees abuse in his family, what this tells Punpun in his psyche is that being assertive as a man is a wrong thing to do because his father is assertive, right? So assertive is no, that's a no. So being assertive is no. So what he does is he goes to the complete opposite, which is extreme submissiveness to Aiko. And this is really, really important to understand because Carl Jung has this concept of the shadow, which is that sometimes when you have very extreme experiences within your childhood, oftentimes, for example, like mother and father fighting, your psyche interprets the dialogue as well as their interactions and their personality and picks and chooses things that are almost not of use within that environment for your survival, right? So Punpun walking outside and saying, "Hey, Dad, what the hell's wrong with you? Stop." That's not going to be conducive to him surviving, right? So unconsciously, your brain, what it says is, you know what? Let's set aside assertiveness and just stay in my room. And whenever I stay in my room, I seem to have no problem of my parents coming inside or like maybe whipping my ass or just maybe like getting me involved within the fight, right? So that creates a shadow, which is in the case of Punpun is I must be submissive in order to avoid interactions or negative interactions, right? And this draws on to his relationship with his friends as well as Aiko. You never see Punpun do within the 20 chapters, at least that I've read, do anything that's assertive to a degree. He's always submissive. He's listening to his friends. He's following his friends. He listened to Aiko, even when she seems a little bit not mentally stable in a sense. There's a panel all the way at the top where his first flashback was with Aiko saying, "I really will kill you if you don't keep the promise." And this entire chapter is almost him him having this battle with his psyche. And you kind of see at the end his shadow side comes out a little bit, where at the end of the chapter he's on his bed and he's really, really concerned. He's like, Jesus Christ, I mean, I'm not going to be able to fulfill my promise. Aiko is going to kill me. Oh my God, this and that. And he has this switch in his brain where he's just like, oh, what if she's just being selfish? Maybe she's just selfish. And he like starts to laugh and giggle, right? And you see his shadow side just coming up a little bit, which is very, very interesting. And the author does this extremely well. Another thing to note is for all the viewers is when you're reading this chapter, it's really important and interesting to note that how do your childhood experiences affect you and how do these things manifest in your daily life, right? So let's say you have good interactions and bad interactions with your parents, right? Now, good interactions, let's say we can put good interactions as your mom was always really nice to you, right? Nice mother. And maybe let's say overly nice mother. So she's a little too nice, right? And we can put that on the good side. Now, bad as in your dad whoops your ass on a regular basis, okay? I don't know why I'm laughing. It's kind of funny to me, but it's okay. That's my sixth sense of humor. I apologize. So yeah, okay. So your dad whoops your ass. That's a bad thing. Your mom is very nice to you, right? How do these things affect you currently? That's the entire plot of these 10 chapters, in my perspective, is being able to take that journey to understand how do my childhood experiences, specifically my experiences with my parents, affect who I am as a person. So let me give you an example. Let me give you a personal example, actually, so it dives a little bit better into your head. So me, I grew up with a single mom, okay? Why is my M like looks stupid as hell? Okay. Jesus. Doctor writing. Single mom, okay? I grew up with a single mom. And what I noticed is that as time went by and I started to learn a little bit more about psychology and read Jung's work and so forth, right? I started to understand that I was being too polite within my within my social surrounding, and it was negatively affecting me, right? So my mom was generally, she was a very, very kind person, and she probably had a personality trait of agreeableness, and she was very agreeable. She was kind, and she would always kind of just, let's say, for example, like a waiter came and they made a mistake, she'd be like, it's okay, this and that, stuff like that, right? So growing up from that, what it made me gather those, I would say, agreeable personalities, right? So me as an agreeable person, agreeable. And from here, I noticed that being too agreeable, especially in the workplace, is not the best thing. So I remember one day I was at work and I was taking shifts. My supervisor had a lot of different shifts. He had to cover. He was just be like, "Oh, so can you catch this?" I'm like, "Yeah, no problem, sir." And the next day, "No problem, sir." The day after that, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? But okay, no problem. And a day after that, I was just like, man, whatever. Okay, yeah, no problem, right? So I noticed my mood going down as well as me being hesitant to say no, but I didn't want to say no. And then I noted in my head that why the hell am I doing this? I really don't want to take the shift, but I'm too scared to say no to him. Or then I noticed I'm not really scared. It's just not a part of my personality. And why is this? Then I realized, oh, it's because within my childhood, there was no type of assertive figure, right? So a father figure normally takes the role of assertiveness. So showing the son, do not let me write this in different. Father, what's the role of a father? Don't take shit from nobody. From nobody, son. Because you're a G. No, I'm joking. But like that's kind of like the main role of a father in a very simplistic manner. Is like, don't take shit from nobody, son. He gives you that assertiveness in your life so that you can project it onto the world and have this balance of agreeableness and assertiveness, right? So having a two-parent household gives you this dynamic of, like I mentioned before, the animus and anima, right? So the archetype of the anima is a very, very caring, nurturing, submissive individual. Archetype of the animus is a very assertive, dominant individual, right? And that in your personality. And these and having a father and a mother that helps you balance these things and navigate the world around you and life around you in a balanced manner, right? And I wasn't doing that. I would just be continuously saying yes to everything. So then I noted, well, I got to stop doing it. How the hell can I stop doing this, right? So I started implementing this thing where whenever I went to a restaurant, right? Let's see. This is me eating a that's me eating a ham sandwich, okay? Kind of looks like something else. We will not talk about that. Don't mention it, guys. You disgusting animals. But yeah, so that's me eating something, right? So I'm at a restaurant, just chilling. Yeah, I'm just chilling, eating something, right? And let's say the waiter got my shit wrong, and I'm like, dude, what the hell's wrong with this girl, right? I made a conscious effort to just tell the waiter in a polite and concise manner, as well as assertiveness, be like, well, you got my order wrong. Can I please have another one? That's it. I wouldn't say anything else. No, it's okay. No, you know what? I'll just eat this anyways. None of that. So I kept on practicing this. Then I noticed, you know what? I was able to say no to a lot more things as I continued to practice these things, right? And while I'm practice these things, what am I doing? Psychologically, within my psyche, I'm going on an adventure, right? Going to a store, sitting down, ordering something, then grabbing your shadow side, something that you neglect, which is assertiveness in my case, and putting it at the forefront and telling the waiter, I don't want this. You made this wrong, right? And in an assertive manner. And I say assertive is key because that's the core personality I'm trying to reintegrate back into myself, right? And this, you can conceptualize this whole process as an adventure. And why am I harping on this so much? I'm harping on this so much because within Goodnight Punpun, that's what this whole entire chapter is showing. The entire chapter is showing the psychological development that you need, and that makes you into a whole person, and that makes you follow what Carl Jung would define as the individuation process, right? The process of becoming whole as a person is to integrate your past experiences, and more specifically your experiences and your dynamics with both of your parents, back into who you are as a person, as well as to acknowledge where it is hindering your growth as a person, right? And all of these flashbacks are very, very important because if you as a person sit down and analyze your life, you will immediately come to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 flashbacks that are extremely key to who you are as a person, right? So maybe you were assaulted as a child, or maybe you faced a lot of poverty, or maybe you lived with a single parent household. Maybe your brother died at a young age. Maybe it wasn't even that severe. Maybe you were just a really rich person and you had a really good life, but everyone neglected you because you had the temperament of your father, who was a very dominant and assertive and arrogant person, right? Maybe you had a disability and you were unaware, and your disability made you the anomaly within your environment, right? Or maybe you had a really poor relationship with your father because he was a drunk, right? And these type of experiences define who you are and impact your psyche. And outlining these experiences, then how do you know what? Let me say. So you outline these 1, 2, 3, 4 experiences, right? Then from there, what you do is you connect and find a common pattern, a pattern within these experiences. Then from there, you decide one root thing that you can change, which could positively affect who you are, right? Something that you can change. Then you implement the change, right? And in my case, the implementing the change was getting a sandwich and telling the waiter that, well, you made the sandwich wrong, right? No to you guys, like I'm not just like saying no to every sandwich I get. If they actually made a mistake, I would do it, right? It was rare. It might happen like once every like few months or something like that. It actually happens more often if you like go to a coffee shop or something. Like in Canada, there's a really popular coffee place called Tim Hortons, and they literally mess up your order on a continuous basis, even if you ask for the basic thing. So that was good practice for me. I'm like, yeah, you messed up my order, and have that conversation, right? So hopefully this gave you guys a little bit more of an understanding of what this chapter was about, which I'll summarize it, right? So the chapter was basically so the chapter shows first you have to read these chapters within a psychological framework. The first, if you go back and look at my first video, it's a little bit more concise, and it demonstrates how it's really useful to read this manga in a psychological manner. And I got that from reading the first 2 chapters. Just with Punpun's interactions with his parents, immediately I got, oh, wow, this has a lot of different Jungian concepts like the shadow and persona, and how he's hiding some of his psyche and how he's repressing a lot of his feelings and so forth, right? So you have to read these chapters in a psychological analysis, and then it opens up a whole different world view on how you can see these chapters, right? So in summary, this chapter outlines parent versus child, right? So the interactions that you have with your parents, then how this impacts your psyche. Then following this, it shows that there are several events in your life that are really, really important for you to kind of sit down and analyze in order for you to get become psychologically whole, right? Or have a sense of wholeness, or have a sense of, or even decrease your anxiety or depressive levels to a degree. A lot of psychotherapeutic relationships, and if you go to therapy and so forth, this is pretty much what you do. You sit down, analyze core interactions that you've had or core memories that pop into your head in relation to like psychoanalysis and so forth, right? And then you break these down to how they're affecting you in your daily life currently. And then you create a rubric and a plan of how to address these things, right? So this entire panel is almost like a psychotherapeutic lesson for every single person who's reading, and how to integrate these type of things back into yourself, as well as how to understand traumatic and maybe irritative experiences that you might have had, right? So after that, you have several events, and from there, you have to identify with these events a pattern of things. So identify a pattern with within these events. Then after you find the pattern, you identify a cause and effect, right? Cause and effect. What has caused these patterns? And okay, let me erase this. So cause and effect, what has caused these patterns, and what is the effect it has on my contemporary life right now? From there, you make decisions on how what is one thing I can change, right? One thing I can change. And then from there, you implement the changes. Implement the changes. Okay? Implement the changes. Wow, Jesus Christ, my writing is extremely horrible. I think I'm gonna say this, it's the pen, guys. So it's not really my writing. I have amazing writing. But yeah, so hopefully this gave you a different way of looking at this. I know this was kind of a long video, but I'm gonna try to do a little bit more of this because I kind of like just talking on the spot and trying to examine things on the spot and analyzing this. It's kind of like a mini lectures I like to do, but hopefully you enjoyed it. Quick little announcements. I did make a Patreon, and I'm gonna be doing a lot more of these mini lectures on Patreon, a little bit more in depth about different concepts like symbolic concepts, the relevance of symbolism, maybe religious interpretations of various different things, as well as interpretations of manga in a very, very deep psychological analysis. This wasn't too deep, it was more on the surface level, but at the same time, there are a couple of other chapters, specifically the ones that I've read up to chapter 1 and 20, which are really, really, really interesting. And even panels, like single panels, there are like single panels that show so much concept and so much of just the human psyche. So consider me really, really impressed with this manga, because it's very, very good. So yeah, I'll be doing a little bit more mini lectures on that. I'll also make frequent posts about some of the interactions I've had in my past, just drawing forth from my life experiences as living in Sri Lanka and different things like that, living in kind of like a war-torn country and kind of immigrating, and as well as therapeutic things. So I will be posting a lot of kind of psychodynamic, analytical psychology, as well as Jungian concepts and how they relate to your everyday life and so forth, right? So there'll be a little bit of cool content there. So if you want to check it out, consider signing up to my Patreon. But other than that, I think I'm going to call it a day for this, and hope you all have a great day. And as always, take care, everyone.